Thanks. I just want to welcome everyone, especially any visitors tonight. I'm Monty Murray. I'm president of the South Wake Conservationists, and we are part of the North Carolina Wildlife Federation, and that covers Raleigh and Point South in Wake County. We see public outreach as a very key part of our conservation mission, and we're really pleased to host tonight's webinar. Before we get started, though, I'd just like to introduce the panel. We have Luke Bennett, who is the conservation coordinator for the North Carolina Wildlife Federation. We also have John Kinsella, who's vice president of South Wake Conservationists, and he also is the chair of the Programs and Education Committee, and he's the one who arranges all this fun stuff. So we really appreciate all the hard work John does making these available to everybody. And last but not least, we have Kris Bass, who I'll introduce more formally later. Kris is going to be our keynote speaker tonight. What I'd like to do is quickly give you an idea of some of the things that we've got coming up in the next few weeks, this month, really. Starting tomorrow. Tomorrow, by the way, is Groundhog Day. Some of you may know the movie, and the tradition of seeing the shadow. There's an event out at White Deer Park in Garner, and we're going to participate. And this is one of the many public events that we participate in. We like to, give an exhibit and share some information about what we do and the conservation information that we can share. So that we'll be doing tomorrow in Garner. And then the following week at White Deer Park Nature Center, we're going to have a program that's part of our Eco Kids program, and that's on red wolves. So that's for all the local kids will be coming and learning about red wolves, seeing a video and doing some sculpting. The following day, we have another Eco Kids activity at Bass Lake Park in Holly Springs, and that will be a waterfowl walk and sketch. As we walk around the lake, the kids will be observing these various waterfowl. Now is a great time of year for all these migratory birds, so that'll be fun. And then something that we do on a pretty regular basis is taking care of our various pollinator gardens and native plant gardens that we maintain in various public places. We'll do a little winter garden maintenance at Crowder Park on February 21st. And then finally, we have our next public meeting, which is going to be in person at Bass Lake Park, which is in Holly Springs. And we're going to talk about native turtles. That'll be Sarah Goldsmith, who has a lot of information and expertise in this, and she's going to bring some live animals, and it's going to be a really interesting evening. So please, if you're in the area, come see that as well. That's on March 7th. So what I'd like to do is introduce our guest speaker tonight, and that is Kris Bass. And Kris is a professional engineer, and he's been implementing innovative stream, wetland, and stormwater projects for over 20 years. He's passionate about bringing nature-based solutions to underserved communities, and he's active with several environmental nonprofits. He's the principal and owner of Kris Bass Engineering, and he's delivering grant-funded stream and wetland restoration projects, dam removals, and stormwater retrofits, and all of that directly benefits wildlife by restoring native ecosystems. They partner with environmental nonprofits and government groups, which includes the Nature Conservancy, the Piedmont Conservation Council, Sound Rivers, and several small towns in North Carolina. Kris is also a board member with Partners for Environmental Justice, which is focused on advocating for fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people with respect to improving both human and natural communities. So I'm really looking forward to this. I know all of you are as well. Before we begin, Luke will be our moderator this evening, and he'll explain how you can ask questions during this session. Over to you, Luke.
Thanks, Monty. Yeah, as Monty said, my name is Luke Bennett, the Conservation Coordinator for the North Carolina Wildlife Federation. I really appreciate everyone joining us tonight. I do want to point out real quick that if you'd like to ask a question, you are more than welcome to do so. You can type your question into the chat or into the Q&A. Both of those are available at the bottom of your screen. And you can type those questions at any point during the presentation. We'll save some time at the end after the presentation and get to as many of those questions as we can. Thank you all again, And now I will pass it over to Kris to share his screen, and we'll get this presentation going. Thank you, everyone.
All right, wonderful. Thank you for such a kind introduction, and thank you for having me here. All right, is that you see?
Yeah, looks good to me.
All right, wonderful. I am getting over a little bit of a cold, so if I'm a little scratchy, I apologize. I will battle through. But if, excuse me, if I disappear for a second or two, it's because I'm taking a sip of my tea, and I'll be right back with you. All right, what I'm here to talk about is nature-based solutions, specifically ecological restoration. The idea behind nature-based solutions is that we can't solve all of our problems just by using the same old techniques that caused the problems in the first place. What we'd like to be doing and what we would like to be pursuing is the idea of working with nature instead of working against nature or working to control nature. And ecosystem restoration is one of the tools in the nature-based solutions toolbox. The idea behind restoration is that with a little bit of help, we can put these ecological communities that we've damaged back on the right trajectory. They can recover, and we can again get the services and the systems, the ecosystem services from them that we really deserve. And the theory behind restoration has everything to do with trajectories. And ecological communities left to themselves would probably be on a certain trajectory. But as soon as humans get into the mix and they cause a disturbance to that system, they set that trajectory off. And we lose a lot of the ecosystem services that we need to keep our planet healthy. And the idea behind restoration is to start that trajectory over, is to give those communities a little bit of help so that they can recover themselves. And what we do, or what we have an expertise in, is hydrology. And what you see here is that in a lot of these systems, hydrology is the foundation. It is like the building block for all the other pieces of the puzzle. Once you can establish the right hydrology, then soils can develop properly, vegetation can grow, and bugs and wildlife can benefit from that. And when you have all these things working together, you can get these incredible things out of it, like the storage of carbon, the cycling of nutrients, protection from floods and fires, and then, of course, wildlife habitat. The first type of restoration I'd like to talk to you about is Pocosin and wetland restoration. And in eastern North Carolina, we have in the past had millions of acres of Pocosin wetlands. And a lot of those wetlands have been damaged and impacted by drainage ditches. The figure on the left is a network of ditches that you can basically see from an airplane. You see this incredible matrix of lines, though every one of those lines is a drainage ditch. And don't get me wrong, we need drainage in order to live at the coast, in order to farm at the coast. But a lot of the drainage that we've installed is less than 100% effective, and it's damaged wetlands that we really need. And the picture on the right is a graphic that sort of depicts the extent of historic Pocosin wetlands. And all the purple and the blue on there are large complexes of this specific wetland type that could be restored with a little bit of help. And this is how we've damaged them. We humans have installed canals, drainage ditches, usually for the purpose of getting the timber. And then we make those canals bigger so that we can convert those timber areas into farms, some of which have been very highly effective and some of which have been less effective. The problem with these ditches is it lowers the water table in the surrounding wetlands, and it makes those areas very susceptible to fire. And what can happen when a Pocosin wetland catches fire is that those fires can get very big. They can affect large areas of the landscape. And what is particularly unique about them is the ground and the soil itself can catch fire. And that's because the soil is made of highly decomposed organic matter, and there's a lot of carbon in there. And when it catches fire, it is very hard to put out. And then you can literally lose feet of soil during a big fire event. And the picture you see on the right there is a post-fire picture where the ground surface was at the base of that tree you see. And that fire burned away several feet of peat, and we lost millions of tons of carbon into the atmosphere. These fires are so big that they can be seen from space. And this picture shows two fires going on, one that was in the Pocosin Lakes area and another that was in the Great Dismal Swamp area. And so because of these vast complexes of wetlands and the amount of carbon that is stored in them, there are a lot of people who are interested in re-wetting this peat and protecting these Pocosins. These Pocosins are also incredible habitat for lots of different species and an incredible number of birds. You'll also be interested to know that the restoration efforts at both of these places are some of the largest in the entire United States. And so how do we do it? It really isn't that complicated to reverse the impacts of drainage. What you really need to do is block off the ditch. And the way we do it is with these structures called flashboard risers, which are basically a pipe with a vertical component to it. And that vertical component has a series of slots in it. And once installed, you can put boards into these slots and you can control the water level in the ditch. A finished product might look like this picture, where you can see here there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 slots for boards, all of which, except for one, are filled up almost to the top with boards. The remaining slot that isn't filled up, the boards are set very close to the average ground surface. And what that does is it keeps the drainage at the level of the land, and it mimics the natural hydrology of the Pocosins. And if you plan enough of these and install enough of them, you can restore almost natural hydrology to very large areas of Pocosins. We also occasionally use what are called sheet pile weirs as another method of blocking the flow in ditches. These are sheet pile, just like you would see at the coast or on a bulkhead, and they have a little slot in the middle where you can adjust the boards. We sometimes rely on a more manual labor technique where when we can't get into a ditch with machinery. This is the construction of what's called a beaver dam analog. And this is done all entirely by hand, mostly using wood that you find nearby. And what we're doing in this picture is building basically a little mini starter kit of a beaver dam. We drive wooden posts into the ditch, and then we weave willow branches or saplings between them, and then we pack leaves and mud as much as we can get all around it. And the idea here is that this little dam will catch additional debris, additional mud, and maybe one day would be a nice home for a future beaver. And this can be an effective way of also blocking off a ditch, lessening the drainage in a Pocosin, and re-wetting the soil profile so that it will be more resistant to fire. And this is what a restored Pocosin block might look like. The water level you see here is basically you're looking at an old ditch that has been blocked, and the water is being held near the ground surface. What you also see in the picture are tree plantings. And in some cases, it's desirable to put some native wetland tree species out into the restored area. What you're looking at here are either cypress or Atlantic white cedar trees. So efforts at these sites have restored natural hydrology to thousands of acres of impacted Pocosins, but there are many thousands of acres that are still left to be restored. We are currently working on projects at several game lands, nature preserves, Croatan National Forest, and other large tracts of Pocosin areas. What these projects do is restore the ecosystem functions of Pocosins. They lower the risk of catastrophic fire. They are protective of climate change, and the reduction of fire also helps protect public health. Some of the benefits that are harder to see is that they provide storage for rainfall. They reduce the water that flows downstream, and they improve the resilience in adjacent, already flood-prone communities. And that is where the nexus of Pocosin restoration and environmental justice come together, is that many of the people who live adjacent to Pocosins are living in very flood-prone areas and would benefit from those ecological communities functioning at their maximum potential. And I have linked a couple of videos here, which are really excellent videos about Pocosins and Pocosin restoration. I know that many of you have been to Pocosin Lakes, and it's truly a special place. And now maybe next time you go, you'll look at it maybe just a little bit differently. I'd also like to talk a little bit about stream restoration. Restoring streams is also all about trajectories. Human beings have done a lot of damage to streams. A lot of that was done with machines where we dug streams and we straightened them. But we've also done a lot of damage with development. The runoff that comes from our shopping malls and our houses is more and travels faster than streams are used to. And that can cause major erosion and major degradation of habitats. The goal of stream restoration is mostly to stabilize eroding stream banks, but it also includes restoring natural stream features and the habitats that are inside of there. And you can see here, there are a lot of groups who are involved in stream restoration. North Carolina is one of the top states in the US. We spend a good amount of money on stream restoration every year. So what we're trying to fix is things like this. This is a stream bank in Holly Springs. It's about 15 feet tall. There, as you can see here, trees are falling into it, and more of this bank erodes every time it rains. This is a stream bank in Wake Forest. It also is about 15 feet tall. And the fence that you see here is right up against a greenway. And this stream bank had eroded back actually underneath the pavement of the greenway. And the fence is there to try to keep people safe. We have bigger rivers too that are eroding. This is a mountain river, and you can see dramatic stream bank erosion here. So a natural stream will be a windy one. It will have stable stream banks and a natural pattern of riffles and pools that are used by bugs and fish. And when we restore a stream, it's a pretty, it's a kind of a scorched earth kind of a event. We're basically taking a stream back to its very beginnings and trying to rebuild the banks, rebuild the bed, incorporate riffles, incorporate pools. All of this is done with heavy machinery, and then start the vegetation process again. When we first build a stream, there are a lot of rocks involved. It is actually quite fun. It sort of reminds you of like playing in the stream when you were a kid and like throwing rocks around and stuff like that. But we get to use a lot bigger toys to do it with. And what we're trying to do is get to something like this. This is the same stream that I showed you 2 pictures ago after a growing season. So we're trying to at least initially establish the stream features, get grasses and successional vegetation to grow, and then eventually have the trees grow in behind that. Here's another example in Siler City. This is a stream that had been channelized and dug. The entire corridor here was covered in kudzu. And so this project involved eradicating that kudzu, starting over with the stream banks, and reinvigorating the features inside the stream itself. Stream restoration is largely done in the dry. And so when you're doing this work, you got to have a good crew to operate the pumps. And when you're done, you might have something that looks like this. This is over at Bass Lake Park, which I know is a place many of you have been. This section of stream was badly damaged during Hurricane Matthew and restored just a few years ago. Not all stream restoration is done in the Piedmont. This is a tidal marsh project at what's called the North River Wetlands Preserve. This is a 6,000 acre wetland reserve that is spearheaded by the North Carolina Coastal Federation. It's a beautiful place that was an extensive complex of wetlands that was all turned into a pretty productive farming operation. And when the farmers were ready to not farm anymore, the Coastal Federation was able to acquire it and return every inch of it into natural wetlands. So everything you see in this picture here, just a few years before this picture, was all farmland. It was not, this area in particular was not very productive. It was under the threat of sea level rise and salt intrusion. And all of what you can see here was turned into a tidal marsh with a tidal creek. This is a similar marsh restoration project that was done in Jacksonville at a place called Sturgeon City. This is a public environmental education center and a park. They have beautiful boardwalks there. And all the marsh that you experience at this place is all restored. This area beside the bay was historically used for a landfill, and all of that material was excavated to restore the marsh that you see here in the picture. So why is stream restoration so important? There are several reasons that all of this work are really important that have to do with water quality. But I also think that it's incredibly beneficial to wildlife, and not just the wildlife that lives in the water. But for me, I find that free-flowing streams and having access to them is incredibly important to my personal well-being. And this picture is one that I took at Umstead Park along Crabtree Creek. And I took this picture during COVID, and this area became sort of a sanctuary for me during that time. I think that happened to a lot of people, is that during COVID, they really reconnected with nature, because that was all we were really supposed to be doing anyway. But those feelings have really invigorated my work, and I think invigorated a lot of people in this area. All right. I also like to touch a little bit on dams and talk about dam removal and barrier removals. Dams and culverts are tremendous barriers for aquatic life. They're really insurmountable to most types of fish. And in North Carolina, we have thousands of dams that are in terrible condition, and it's not practical to maintain them, and they're not really useful anymore. And removing these structures is one of the fastest ways that we know of restoring long stretches of stream corridors. And there are a number of agencies that are really active in this dam removal space. Lots of them are nonprofits, and some are, of course, government agencies. This is what was called the Power Dam. It happens to be in Rocky Mount, Virginia. And it was a 25-foot tall dam that was not being used for really any purposes. The removal of most eastern dams is not what you may have seen in movies where you see incredible dramatic explosions. What we typically would do is use a machine like what you see here with a large jackhammer on it, and ever so slowly chip away at the concrete and rock, taking the dam down at very small intervals and freeing the river. And what happens when you first take a dam down is there is sediment that has been trapped behind it, and lots of years of vegetation that have to readjust to a new free-flowing river. And over a couple of years' time, you will end up with something like this, where that has been revegetated, stabilized, and looks like a natural free river again. This is the Mill Burney Dam. This is in Raleigh. And this is one that you can go visit very easily. And this is what it looked like before it was removed. And then this is what it looked like afterwards. This site right here freed up about 15 miles of river that was completely isolated to fish. And now is the site of a very, very popular public park. Not every dam removal that you see has to do with a big concrete dam. This is an old farm pond that was in a neighborhood in Cary. And the earthen dam was in very terrible shape, and the community that owned it had really not much interest in trying to save it and take care of it. So a few partners, nonprofit partners, got together and raised the grant money to remove the dam and restore the stream behind it. That process keeps the dam from a catastrophic failure, and it revegetates and stabilizes all the sediment that has been trapped inside the pond. And this is what that former pond looks like now. There's a natural meandering stream that flows through the bottom of it, and a developing floodplain set of wetlands. Some dams are not really eligible for removal. This particular dam is in Madison, North Carolina, and the town's water supply was located right up against the dam, and the town is very dependent on having the dam and the water. However, this dam was over 50 years old and appeared to be in danger of collapsing. But instead of rebuilding the dam in the way that it was, the Fish and Wildlife Service saw an opportunity here to create a project that would be a win for people and also a win for fish. And what was done here was boulders, a huge amount of boulders, were used to cover the dam and build a series of steps. And these steps allow fish to swim up and over the dam and people to paddle down and through the dam. And this is what it looks like when it was finished. If you were to go here, you would probably never even know that there was a dam there. It looks like a natural free-flowing river, and the area surrounding this has been turned into a park. And this park is accessible for boats, tubes, and people who just want to swim or fish off the beach. So dam removal is it is sort of new in North Carolina, but we have done a lot more of it than some of our neighboring states. My opinion is that most dams are they're not safe places. A lot of them are behind fences. People can't get to the river, and we don't really want people to be on the dam or around it. But removing them and creating an access there is a way of not only freeing the river, but freeing people to use the river and people to experience the river the way that they're really meant to do so. So I want to close my talk with a couple of comments about environmental justice and linking environmental justice to these restoration activities. My opinion is that environmental justice is a restorative movement. It's about reconnecting people to nature the way nature is supposed to be. This is especially true for communities that have been forced into places where flooding, pollution, or other damages are widespread. Those things have really damaged people's relationship with nature and also their relationship with wildlife, because the nature that they know is one that's always flooding them, or one that is something to stay away from because it's polluted, or it's a wetland that they can't go into because it's full of trash. Restoring these areas the way they are supposed to be is our way of creating that connection again. It's our way of recreating that trajectory, not just the trajectory for wildlife or just the trajectory for those ecological services, but the trajectory for people and the way that people are interacting with the environment. My last slide is to thank you all. You don't have to be a dam buster to be part of the restoration movement or to be a part of environmental justice. Everything that you do that makes for a more healthy environment and a more healthy place for people to interact with that environment is changing the way that people view nature. I see it all the time in my job. I see a lot of really positive stories from people, and I see a lot of positive progress in these areas. And a lot of it starts at the grassroots level, what people experience in their neighborhood, with their neighbors, the way that they handle their lawns or their gardens or even their leaves can make a big difference in how people grow up and the things that they pursue for their life. Okay.
Thank you, Kris.
Yeah, I meant to start a timer when I started, but I didn't keep up with it, so I hope it was all right.
No worries at all. I guess if anyone has any questions for Kris, please feel free to type them into the chat or the Q&A. I had no idea you've done work at Bass Lake. That's the South Wake chapter. That's actually on their logo is Bass Lake, and we do a lot of work out there and a lot of nature outings and things. And it is a great place to connect with nature, and it's a great place for wildlife, and it's great habitat over there as well. So I guess, just walking on the trails, sometimes you don't realize all the work that went into, making those trails or restoring the habitat there after a hurricane. So I think I speak for everyone when I say we really do appreciate all the work you've done in the area. I had a question right off the bat. So in terms of restoring habitat, what projects have you been a part of where you've seen the highest return on your investment?
Good question. I didn't talk about this specifically, but this project in Madison that involved a dam was really driven by a fish called the Roanoke log perch. And that fish it's a darter, but it's endemic to the Dan River Basin. And that particular dam was blocking off about 75 miles of river from that fish. And now that barrier has been removed, there's a lot of habitat that's been made more available. We are working now on another dam, which would be one of the last dams. Well, this one would open up another good stretch of river along that stretch.
Yeah, the Wildlife Federation does a lot of habitat restoration work across the state, and it's always a question of where can we be the most productive, where are we the most needed, and we're always rooted. We always tie it back into wildlife and what can we do that's going to have the highest impact on wildlife in the state of North Carolina. Unfortunately, WRC provides species of greatest conservation needs, so we can reference that and act accordingly, right? But it seems that there are quite a few questions in the chat here. I'm not going to take up your whole night, but I'll start from top to bottom. John asks, are you receiving the necessary political support to accomplish your projects?
Good question. In 20 years of working in this area, there has never been a better time than now, a time that we felt more supported than now. There are more resources, more public and political will towards these things now than there ever have been. And so I think the answer to that is largely yes.
And another potential roadblock, I guess, something that we experience at the Wildlife Federation quite a bit, is trying to work with developers. And do you work with developers to achieve a common goal? Is there a common goal there?
Good question. We don't really work with developers. I won't say that we wouldn't. From my business, we largely not in the business of development, and we don't really work with them very much. From a PEJ standpoint, we know that there's going to be development, and we are interested in cooperating with developers and being involved with advising them or trying to incorporate some better ways or more sustainable ways to create healthier communities. We're especially interested in that area when it comes to affordable housing. So it's not like I wouldn't work with developers, but right now it's not something I'm doing.
And I guess a follow-up question to that is I imagine you have or are approached with a lot of project opportunities, how do you determine which projects to take on and which ones take priority?
Yeah, good question. Well, the ones I'm showing you are, the ones that we kind of love the most. It's sort of like our greatest hits. Um, we have over the years developed a preference for grant-funded projects and nonprofit partners. To me, those are the type of projects that are consistent with our mission, and I think that's how we tend to prioritize them. Is just choosing based on the missions, but what I showed you isn't everything that we work on, but they what I showed you are the things that are my favorites. So, of all the things we do, Pocosin restoration is the one that has the most bang for the buck. You are protecting the most stuff. You're doing the most for climate change, flooding, and habitat. This is just my opinion. The second most is the dam removal, because you can achieve such a big impact in terms of length of habitat with a small project. Stream restoration, all the other things are great, but if I ball them all up together, those two things stand out as having a bigger impact.
Yeah, we took a trip to Pocosin Lakes National Wildlife Refuge last weekend, actually, and heard all the tundra swans whooping and hollering and honking and having a great time. And I think to go out and see that, I know not everyone's been to that area of the state, but it really is, like you said, a very special, very important habitat for wildlife. It's unlike any place I've really ever seen. Um, and Natalie actually had a question. Really, I think she was the first one to ask a question. And this is maybe helps put it in context for people. But what are the characteristics of a wetland that make it a Pocosin wetland?
Oh, that's good. So all around North Carolina, we have all kinds of different types of wetlands. What makes a Pocosin is two things. One is the source of the water. Pocosins get all of their water from rainfall, just rain that falls directly on it. But what makes a Pocosin really unique is the soil. So Pocosins are the only ones that have extensive peat soils, and those are made from organic material that has been very slowly decaying because over thousands of years, because it's so wet.
Thank you. I think that puts it in context for people. Looks like Gail has a question. We have quite a few questions, so I'm gonna not run through them too quick, but I'll throw them at you if you don't mind. This one's from Gail, and Gail is wondering how much of an effort is made to replant stream beds with native North Carolina plants.
Oh, 100%. So any stream restoration project or any project that has restoration as a part of it is going to have 100% native plantings, and is probably going to have a certain amount of effort done to try to remove invasives prior to that planting.
So we do have some questions about invasive species too, but I know that's a hot topic for sure. Diane is wondering, kudzu, how did you remove to avoid it regrowing into the pond down the line? And then Kris simply asks, how do you eradicate kudzu? So we'll let you solve that problem.
Yeah, so two at once. We've encountered kudzu a number of times in stream corridors, and there have been a number of ways that we've used to remove it. The one I think, the one that we used on that site was, the answer is chemicals. Several rounds of herbicides were used, and then removal of the dead material. And what happens in stream restoration a lot is that you are going to do some amount of grading to prepare the stream banks and the floodplain. And so you have the opportunity to remove a decent amount of the root mass of invasives. And then you have a chance to sort of start that over. It's sort of like a race is starting as soon as you're done. It's like you're trying to beat the invasive species with the native stuff. We also have had some success with goats. Goats apparently love to eat kudzu, and if you bring them, have an opportunity to bring them and let them eat the kudzu, we've had some success with that.
Which kudzu would eat all the invasive species. I've been doing a lot of privet removal lately, and it's a bear for sure. It takes a lot of hands, but it is rewarding to see, a whole area cleared, and then to see the fruit of your labor afterward, to see these native species coming back. But unfortunately, we can't just let a whole bunch of goats loose out there and let them. I don't think they would go for privet, but looks like we've got this one's from, let's see which one I'm going to go to. Joel is asking, so there is a town in eastern North Carolina. It might be Pineville or Princeton, because he doesn't want to give up the exact name there, but it's a town that is severely damaged by heavy rains and hurricanes. And his question is, did they build too much in the floodplain? And what is being done to remediate this from occurring again?
Well, over time, in general, humans we've built too much in the floodplain. There's no question about it. And then what exacerbates that problem is we also build upstream. And the more we build on the high ground, the more water we're sending down to the low ground. And that is a simple way of explaining some of the environmental injustices that have been done in the past, is that many of the communities that were developed, or I'm going to say designated for certain types of people, were in floodplains, in places that would naturally flood. And the flooding in those areas only continues to get worse. Now, the question may be about a town, a specific town in North Carolina called Princeville.
He mentioned that.
This is a town that is in the floodplain of the Tar River, and it is a historic Black community, and it has flooded numerous times with hurricanes, and they have it is a very difficult situation. There is a levee that has been built there. It is designed to try to protect that community, but at the end of the day, it is still in the floodplain of a major river. And it is likely that it will be under threat almost continuously.
I did want to ask you a question about environmental justice. In your opinion, in terms of advancing environmental justice, what does progress look like?
Good question. I think the environmental justice movement is still trying to define that, and really grappling with that question. I tend to lean towards this concept of connection, partly because it's the area that I know about, right? Is restoration, healthy communities, and restoring that connection between people and their environment, and experiencing environment the way that it's supposed to be. As an example, if you live in a neighborhood that is next to across the street from you is a floodplain wetlands, but those floodplain wetlands have been treated like a dumping grounds for the last 40 years. And when you look across there, what you see is kudzu and trash. And you've been taught since you were a kid that that's a place that you do not go. That's a real problem for me. Like, that's something that I think we would like to fix.
Yeah, I grew up in Durham, and the Eno River State Park was essentially my backyard, and it is like, thinking back how much that formed who I am today. I certainly don't take that for granted, but as I've gotten older, I have realized that, as you said, not everyone has access to that level of pristine habitat and pristine recreating area outside, and it certainly helps my job every day to realize that, there's an opportunity to get other people excited about this as well. And Lisa has a question, or she says there's a lot of compliments in here, so it's hard to a lot of people saying how much they love the talk, so it's hard to weave through them. But Lisa says, I love this talk. It resonated with me. We have a farm with a creek, and 10 years ago it was 3 feet wide and 3 inches deep. And then now, after big storms, the banks it seems like the banks have eroded. We also found out that upstream a new stormwater pipe was installed, which is making it worse. A few years ago, beavers have moved in and are really helping. The creek is now 50 feet wide and deep with several dams. And the big question that she asks is, what else can Lisa do? And that's a question I wrote down as well, as with people who don't have a professional engineering experience, what can they do on their property to help create spaces that are resilient and innovative and conducive to wildlife?
Okay, good question. I think whatever you're interested in doing, that's what I tell people. Like, if you're interested in a pollinator garden, or native plantings, or putting in a little pond in your backyard, or building a little wetland off to the side, all of those things are awesome. They're great. Even if it's just disconnecting your downspouts and letting the water run across the lawn, that's a sustainable action that you can take that might influence a neighbor or someone who walks by your house and sees that and thinks to themselves, like, oh, we don't have to just have green grass everywhere. If you have a stream in your backyard, the best thing you can do is give it some room to breathe. Too many people cut down all the trees all the way down to their stream, or they want to build a shed right on top of the stream, and they're encroaching on the space that the streams need. So that's kind of my advice. If you feel like you're having bad erosion problems and you feel like you really are motivated to do something about it, then what you can start with is your Wake County Soil and Water District. That's a good place to start, because they can connect you to all kinds of different resources for stream improvements.
Saw this on your website that you guys do a lot of modeling and monitoring. And Janine is wondering, could you talk a little about any monitoring or maintenance that you do after a restoration project? Is that type of work not easy to do given time constraints on grant funding?
You've hit the nail on the head. What we like to do, most of the grants we get last for a few years, like common length will be 3 years. And what we would like to do is design a project in the first year, build it in the second, and then have at least a year to watch over it, make some adjustments, and make some tweaks. But after that, those grant resources are gone. So what is important is to have partners who care about a project, or a community who is willing to take on the maintenance needs of that work. And that is something that we generally would try to identify for a project so that it has that type of attention. Um, it's not always possible to do that, but that is how we would like to do it.
Heather is wondering, in your opinion, how detrimental is common everyday trash to the wildlife of man-made lakes and ponds? Getting to these areas where trash is located would require walking across the soils during low water for cleanup. So I don't know how familiar you are with the impact of cleaning up trash for some of these wild places.
Yeah, that's probably in an area that I don't really have any expertise. I have seen a ton of trash. Um, there are a couple places where Sound Rivers has implemented these trash collectors in streams, and you wouldn't believe how quickly these things fill up and need to be emptied. But I will have to say that I don't really know the answer about the impact of trash.
I do want to. I've seen those trash collectors, and they're really neat. They're very innovative. And are there any new technologies or restoration techniques that you think will leverage your ability to restore habitat?
I think that the the beginnings of most restoration were really the goals were very much on stability of streams, the success of vegetation, and with the idea that if we could get good at those building blocks, then the habitat would come later. But now the practitioners in these areas have gotten pretty good at those basic things. And I find that the future of this practice is going to be more focused on wildlife and providing habitats. And I have seen what I think are some pretty unique and innovative ideas to try to accelerate habitat development for like bugs. Um, I saw a really interesting paper recently about the configuration of rocks and how different types of rocks might benefit macroinvertebrates. So I feel very positive that that is something that's going to be it's going to be a focus in the future, but I don't know that it has been. I think there's some knowledge gaps there that need to be I don't know, overcome to really make that good, but I do think that it can happen.
I think we still have some questions here. You just tell me when you want to cut it off, but let's see. John is wondering, are you aware of any Wake County low-income neighborhoods interested in working with, an organization, a nonprofit organization like NCWF to create pollinator gardens? Seems like a
Good
very
question.
personal question, John. Yeah.
The PEJ has a focus on a couple of Wake County neighborhoods, and we have been successful at having some rain gardens installed at different places at a church and some residences, but we have not really tried pollinator gardens. But it's something that we could discuss further, and we could maybe advertise if send out some feelers to see if people were interested in that.
When you guys are putting pollinator plants or native plants along the streams, so that's certainly serving that purpose there for pollinators. Gail is wondering, with so much rampant clear cutting and development in areas like Apex and Cary, is anyone planning for future drainage needs when there are more non-permeable surfaces?
Is anyone planning for that? All of our cities and North Carolina in general has what I consider to be fairly progressive rules about stormwater and controlling stormwater. So if you are planning to build a new shopping mall, then it will be your obligation to capture the stormwater runoff from all of the impervious surfaces you propose, and to control that runoff at a natural rate. Now, those rules have been in place for roughly 20 years. We've had those rules, and I don't know that I really think flooding is being curbed. So I don't think that those rules are working at their maximum efficacy. There's a lot of improvement that could be made in that area. But in general, the answer is yes. There are a lot of people who are interested in stormwater. There are a lot of people who are thinking about stormwater impacts. And, I mainly focused my talk on restoration, but, I could talk a long time about stormwater technology and stormwater measures as well.
We actually have our NCWS Director of Conservation Partnerships is a stormwater expert, so we're happy to have her on board now.
Awesome.
But I guess, do you have time for maybe 2 more questions? Does that sound okay?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Marnie is wondering, well, she says it's obvious how the Madison Dam retrofit benefited the river, but can you explain how it also benefited the water source for the residents?
Right. So the main thing is that it secured the intake that they had there. There was some concern that the dam that they had, the dam that they had was actually cracking in a few places, and wasn't holding water the way it was supposed to. So when we built the boulders and steps, we basically secured that for, well, probably for all time. That will never become an issue again. And what happened with that project is, because it was so beneficial to water supply, the environment, and people, that it raised a lot of interest from different grant funded groups. And so the town was actually able to implement quite a few upgrades to their water plant, like their intake systems and their plant. So it benefited them that way as well.
John is wondering, do you get involved in advocating for state, federal, local environmental legislation? It's a big question.
No, not really.
Keep it at that. And I guess as a closing question, how do you or do you maintain hope and optimism in a world where habitat destruction and species loss has become more prevalent?
Excellent question. No, I see a lot of good stuff, and there are a lot of people out there just like me who are doing good work. It doesn't have to be something huge to have a positive effect. And it's so easy to see negatives and hear all the negatives on the news and via whatever sources we want, it's a lot harder to find the wins. And here's a win that is on my mind is when I very first started in this business, it was there wasn't that many people doing it. And when I hired the first people at my business, I would only get like 1 or 2 applicants, and I almost had to recruit the first people. But we are now hiring. We have an open position, and we have received a large number of applicants. We are receiving applicants from a very diverse pool of people, which is not something we ever got before. And we are receiving applicants from people who are working in entirely different jobs and want to give up those jobs to do environmental work. And I know that sounds like a small thing. It's just something that's on my mind because I was doing it today. But to me, that's a sign that our society is moving in the right direction, that we care about this stuff and that we're going to fight for it. And I said before that the grant, the resources that are available for restoration work are better than they ever have been. The same thing is true for environmental justice. There is so much energy in that space and so many people interested in that space. It is hard for it not to feel contagiously positive.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I've been in NCWF for just under 2 years now, and there's all these grizzled conservation veterans that I work with, and that can be intimidating, but there's a lot to learn from those folks, and they've definitely expressed to me what you just said to me now is there's more energy and enthusiasm for conservation and for the environment than they've ever seen. And this is an exciting time to be in this field and working in the right direction. Right. But thank you, Kris, for your time. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you all. Thanks for having me.
And I'll let Monty close it out here.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you so much for all this really important work that you do, and for sharing it with us in such a I guess engaging way. I think everybody got a lot out of this. I am so encouraged just listening to your story and what you do. That the world of conservation is not limited to just the small nonprofit volunteer groups. To see a for-profit business that's grounded in these core values and making a big difference is so encouraging to see that. And my hat is off to you. So thank you for all that you do.
Yeah, I'd like to also add, Kris, it was a great presentation. I think you did a good job in terms of merging, the two topics. And, I kind of reinforce what Monty said. It's very encouraging to see, more and more people getting involved. It is very easy at times to, get discouraged, but I think we have to just keep staying positive and, move ahead. So, I really appreciate all the good stuff you're doing. And also hats off to David Barber for, recruiting her for this presentation. I think he hit a home run on that.
I wanted to work his name in the presentation, but then I didn't want him to take the blame if I did something terrible.
We can blame it on Dave, no problem.
And thanks to everybody who's joined tonight's webinar. We appreciate your engagement. We had a lot of really good questions tonight. It was very, very good. Thank you.
All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.